So I've got the recording started now, and I will post the recording of this session up at YouTube in case you want to look at it later. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to admit is that I've practiced what I'm going to show tonight a little bit, but not nearly as much as I did for the other webinar. And I got a bunch of emails today, and it was a busy day for me. Asking about adding topics for tonight, and I just didn't get through all of those. So so when we get to the end of the session, those people that sent me emails today about topics tonight, just pose the question later. Okay. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to just do some real general stuff about Race Director, especially for new timers. But I'm always surprised at how many experienced timers find some surprising things when I go through this. So first of all, in Race Director, the hierarchy begins with at the race level. So a race is really defined as an event that's going to happen on a specific date usually. And in the file menu, that's what open, new, delete are all about. So how you manage your races. And you know what? Okay, here's something you never want to do. You never really want to start up Race Director twice. So I've got it started twice here, sure enough. So we're going to end this one. I'm going to cancel this one. And I'm sorry to say my webinar is off to a bad start. All right. So, obviously, Race Director is really quite like most Windows application. They don't really like to be started up twice, and I don't have a lot of development in there trying to avoid it. So, unfortunately, sometimes that just happens. So anyway, at the race level, the idea is you've got a 3-digit race number, and a race really is intended to be an annual event, which most events are. And so race number 52, the Coast Guard Festival 5K, which maybe just happened in August this month. The idea is when next July comes around and you're ready to start loading participants for the 2015 version of the race, the idea is not to come up with a new open race number. The idea would be to open up the race that you scored last year, and there's a history file process found under the maintenance menu. And this is where all of the past year participants and results and all of that would be. So now this race was run on July 26th, and so now it's a year from them, and we're ready to start the new year. That's what this button here is for. And it gives you a warning that once you begin the new year for the race, it's going to put the current year race, which in the counts you'll always see down at the bottom of the screen. So the bottom of the screen tells us we're in race 52. It's the 2014 version of this race, and there's 1,569 participants. So what this is telling us is it's going to put all 1,569 participants, including their results, into the history, and it's going to wipe the slate clean, ready for the 2015 version. So it asks you if you want to proceed. Make sure you have a good backup, it's saying. So proceed again. And here's kind of a key question, because this is almost always yes. Is the new race exactly 52 weeks after the current race? Yes. And when it is, it will actually calculate that Saturday. In this case, it was on a Saturday. It will calculate that date for you. And essentially, all you have to do is hit OK. It suggests the version of the race is 2015. And it gives you some reminders based on different configurations you have. This race has predetermined bib number ranges by division. Make sure you review those settings. If you didn't make a note of that, you might have forgotten that about last year. So it's just kind of a friendly reminder. And there we go. The 2014 version is in history. And when we close, we see the 2015 version is active, and we have 0 participants. But for this race, All the divisions stayed the same. You know, if there were teams, the teams are still set up. All the age groupings that you used last year are going to be the same again. So it's, which is generally the case. Rarely do races change very much from year to year. So that is by far the best way of managing a race that happens every year. I mean, other things happen as well, like age group record holders are tracked. And you can only be doing things like that if you're always processing in the same race. Okay, if it's a brand new race, that's where File New comes in, and it's up to you to find the, you know, in manage the race number however you, for example, it goes from 7 to 9, so race 8 is actually one that's available. So we'll use race number 8. We'll set the date. It's going to be, you know, August 23rd maybe, and it's the Run for Your Life 5K. Essentially, that's really all there would be to setting up a brand new race. If you want to clone a race, so you want to make this race 8 an exact copy. Yeah, hang on here. If you want to make that race an exact copy of one of the races already in this list, it's just a matter of selecting it by clicking on it here before you hit the build race. So if we wanted to make it an exact copy of this race here, you would highlight it and hit build race. Build race 8 is a copy of race 114. And if you say yes, then the next prompt will be, okay, do you also want all the participants copied? So if you're truly cloning a race and you want all the participants included and all of that, this allows you to do that. All right, so I exited out of that process. But let's actually start a new race. So we use race 8, and I'm not going to clone one. And we'll build the race. All right. Now, so let's first go under the tailoring to tailor divisions, and you'll notice that a race is always set up with what's called a default division. And my suggestion is you use the default division, but the first thing you would do is rename it. So this is going to be the 5K. So the race we're doing is a 5K, 10K. So we're going to rename Division 1 to the 5K. We're going to put the distance in, and we're doing it in miles because we want the pace on all the results reports to come out in minutes per mile. So, even though it's a 5K race, expressing it in miles is going to make the pace come out the way we want. In this race, we happen to want to see it in minutes per mile. The event is a new element in Race Director that's come in over the last couple years, and the sole purpose of the event is for races where you have live results like My Finish, Exact, CT Live, Run Sign Up. The event is actually how we trigger whether or not there's going to be live results. So if that's not the case for your race, if you're not using any of those live results facilities, whether or not you assign an event or not doesn't really matter. But in this case, we'll just leave the event the way it is. And the idea here is, it might be a complicated race where you have a 5K and a 10K, but each of those have multiple divisions. You might have a 5K Open, a 5K Clydesdale, 5K Athena, and likewise for the 10K, you might have those same kind of divisions. So you might have 6 divisions, but maybe the URL that you use for your live results, you only have two, one for the 5K and one for the 10K. In that case, you would set up two events, and you would, and that setup is done over here on the right, and you would assign the three 5K divisions to the 5K event and the three 10K divisions to the 10K event. But I would say in most situations, you don't need to deal with event. Minimum finish time sounds like a great idea. Since it's a, the idea here is, since it's a 5K, really, if you get a chip result that's, 10 minutes, for example, pretty for certain that that's not a true finish result. So in this case, you might want to put like a world record, like 15 minutes or something like that. And if you do, then as results are processed, if the net time for the chip read coming through is under the world record, it's simply discarded. Where that gets a little dangerous is in a situation where you have a 5K and a 10K, and you have someone that registers for the 10K, but they run the 5K. Guess what? They're gonna have a 20-minute finish time, and your 10K is gonna have maybe a 26-minute minimum finish time. Their result will be discarded. So I would suggest only using these in situations where you've got very strict rules about division switching. If somebody signs up for the 10K, they have to be in the 10K no matter what. This is a great setting for that. And I think timers that use this, it's only in that situation. In other situations, it's kind of a dangerous setting. All right. So we're just going to save this. And since this is a 5K, 10K, we'll add a second division, division 2. We'll call this 10K. You notice there's both a division name and a short name. The purpose of the short name is for reporting that goes across divisions, and we want just a real small column to show what division they're in. That's what the short name is for. For example, if you run an overall report but you include both divisions in a single report, but in a column of the report you want to show what the division is, that's an example where the short name would be used. We'll put the distance here in miles again, 6.2 miles. And since there aren't any live results from here, I'm not even going to bother assigning the event and just save it like that. Okay, and actually I screwed up on the division. I gave it a division number 21. So this is a good example of how you would delete a division. And that's all there is to it. Just hit the delete button. We'll add it again, this time division 2. And we have a new division. Okay, now as far as setting up age groups, that is done with the Update Age Groups button. And you'll notice, starting with Racetractor 2014, instead of two divisions, there are two age groupings getting set up, one for the male, 0 to 99, and one for the female. I recognize that since almost every timer sets up this division 0 to 0 for males and females as age not provided, that now the standard setup just sets those up. And there's a setting you're going to see in a minute that can actually turn that off. But that's pretty handy because most races you import data from a spreadsheet, and if the age is missing, it nicely automatically falls. They fall right into that age grouping. Probably the most often used button on this screen is the range insert, because almost every race defines their age groups by, and we're going to begin this at 10 with age group spans of 5 years, and we'll set up 10 of them. All right, yeah, I'm at 10. So that's a good way to quickly get these set up, and then you realize, whoops, I really meant this to go to age 80 and over, so I really meant to have 4 more. So you can again do that with male beginning at age 60, 5-year spans, and I want 4 of them. So now I've got my age groups for the males pretty much set the way I want them to. And to get the females, instead of going through all that bother again, now we can use the copy button, and we're going to copy by gender from male to female. Whoops. And if I could type. And in one step, we have all of our age groups set up. Setting up divisions that are exact copies of each other, again, is simple. You can go immediately to the copy age groups, this time by doing it by division. And we'll copy from division 1. And now all of our 10K age groups are set up as well. The race is scored with the chip system. We generally always want a division for problem chip reads. So division 9 is going to be what we're going to set up for that. And we'll see a little bit more of that in a second. All right, I'm going to do a quick check here of the questions. And I'm assuming that you're all still hearing me. All right. Okay. So I'm getting no questions saying we can't hear you anymore. So I'm assuming this is all still going all right. All right. So next we're going to venture into Taylor options, and I'm just going to kind of rush through these quickly. One kind of neat feature on this screen that's often overlooked is notes. So this is a nice way the Monday after the race to put in all kinds of stuff like, boy, we needed more volunteers at the turnaround point. You know, the train crossed right in the middle of the race. We should have thought of that. You know, all kinds of things kind of in a postmortem that you want to remember for next year. You can type them in here, and then the next year when you use this race again, you can just go in and edit the notes, and you'll see everything that you had saved last year. Essentially, the race ID, you know, which is it's always best to just let race director assign that and use the year. Rarely would you want to do anything else. The date format for international customers, you might want to see dates in a different format. Age calculation date is almost always the race date. It's pretty common with triathlons that the age calculation date is the end of the calendar year, 12/31. That way, as people excuse me, participate in races throughout the year, they stay in the same age group. So that's the purpose of that. Optional data field is, you know, race director, it has standard data fields for most routine things, you know, name, address, email address, t-shirt size, teams, all of the race-related things. But if there's oddball things that you also want to keep track of at the participant level, here's where you can set that up. You know, kind of a common one is in races for charity, is someone a cancer survivor? So you might put in survivor here, and the response would be yes or no. So if that's the case, survivor might be how you would name it. And then the size of that field, we really only need one position. It's going to be a Y or a blank. Yes meaning yeah. And in the case of a yes/no, forced to uppercase is a good setting to have on. All right. The participant master, or the participant master file, is a kind of a behind-the-scenes master file of participant information like their address, email address, birth date, something that is common to the participant across all races. Race Director does a pretty good job of managing that. It's not quite so important anymore. Fewer and fewer people use Race Director to do mailings. Almost everything is done online through online registration sites. So, but the series reports that we were talking about earlier, if you want to track a single individual across several races through a series report, it's this behind-the-scenes participant master that is in place there. So that setting defaults to yes, and you should probably always leave that on. Rest of these are generally fairly self-explanatory. The help is pretty good on all of these. So this is that setting that I was talking about earlier. If you don't want Race Director to automatically set up age not provided age groups, then if you uncheck that, it will only set up a single age group when you add a new division, for all males and all females. Tracking did not start and did not finish is there's a race progress report, especially like in a triathlon. If you're trying to use reporting out of Race Director to figure out who's still in the water, it's more than just a matter of tracking who has a result and who has a start time. You also have to manage people that didn't start the race, and people that drop out is what force did not finish is all about. These things are rather rarely used, but they're important if you need that kind of reporting. Finish line. Does this race have wave starts? Very important settings here. Probably the most common way of doing wave starts is by division. So if in this case it's a 5K, 10K, if the 10K goes off first and the 5K is going to go off 15 minutes later, then we're going to put a 15-minute wave start on that division that starts 15 minutes later. So this is where you specify that. Chip setup, here's where you specify which chip system you're using. And once you do that, there's all sorts of other settings to consider there. And I'm really not going to go into details about that. We'll see some of those in some of the other topics tonight. On the Results 1 tab, here is where you define, does this race have splits or not? So every race is set up as default as a single segment, meaning there's only a finish line. This has nothing to do with about start reads. If you're capturing reads at both the starting line and the finish line, it's still a single segment race. Timing points is we're going to cover that in a few minutes, so I'm going to skip that for right now. And on the Results 2 tab, generally this is reserved for team scoring, and we're going to cover cross country in a few minutes, so I'll cover that then. And in fact, for general race setup, that's pretty much everything that I intended to cover here tonight. Okay, so I am going to move on to the next topic, which I had several requesting some explanation and maybe even an example of Direct Connect. Now, Direct Connect is for chip timers, and generally, if you're chip timing a race, there's two ways of getting results into Race Director. The first race is from the chip system, you save a results file somewhere in a folder on your computer, and you just import them on the chip results screen. So that generally is referred to as manual file transfer chip results. And the other option is Direct Connect. And what I'm going to demonstrate here is how Direct Connect works with IPECO. So I'm going to switch races here. And In Race Director 2014 and earlier, when you use Direct Connect, there's a really critical and required setting, and that is you need to be in data share mode. So the reason is because we're going to have two programs running. Direct Connect, which is a Race Director provided program that actually has a way of connecting to the readers, is one process, and the other process is just Race Director. So because they're both running and trying to share the same data, this data share, enable data sharing over a network is required. And it's kind of a hassle. Now it's corrected, I shouldn't say corrected, it's changed and improved in 2015 in that having this setting on when you're doing Direct Connect will no longer be required. In fact, I'm going to show that now. We're going to leave this off. So we're still going to be, you're going to still have all of your options available to you. A lot of these options disappear when you're in Direct Connect. But what I want to show is that we can, in 2015, you'll be able to start up IPECO Direct Connect without being in data share mode. Okay, so the first question with IPECO that you encounter is, are you connecting to a single reader for both start line reads and finish line reads? I find this is becoming a much more common scenario. I'm going to use a single reader to do two things. I'm going to use it at the starting line, and as soon as everybody's crossed it, that's going to become the finish line, or we're going to move it to the finish line. If you say yes here, then you're going to get a version of the IPECO Direct Connect that's going to require and expect two reads for everyone and a specific gap factor. So for example, if it was a 5K, the gap factor may be something like 10 or 15 minutes. And so the first read that it gets for a participant, it's going to consider their start time. And the second read that goes beyond the gap factor will be considered their finish time. So to get a complete result for someone, it's going to be required that there's two reads separated by the gap factor. In this case, that's not the case. It's just going to be a simple finish line process. So we would say no here. And because I was doing some practicing, I'm going to say yes to clear the times from since the last time this was used. So here is where it gets a little tricky for me in that, Race Director connects to, 8 or 9 different chip systems, but I have 0 equipment to test with. So, so what I actually end up doing is I've written some programs that mimic what the reader does. So what you're going to see next is nothing you would ever do, but this is a little program that actually mimics what the reader is going to do. So there's a specific port number that you need to, and if it's MyLapse, it's going to be a different port. If it's ChronoTrack, it's going to be yet a different port, but for either the Elite or the Light reader, it's port 10,200, and you specify what kind of times are going to come. You put in an IP address, which I don't need to do, and you connect. And then as soon as you're connected, Direct Connect is here waiting for reads. So the way I mimic a read is I've got this button here, and I'm just going to press it a bunch of times. You see here I have 18 reads, and many of these were a double read, like a first scene, last scene for each participant. So when we start up Race Director, the idea is we're still, if we go run, so we've had, several people cross the finish line, but if I go run the overall finish report, it's empty. Nobody's finished yet. And it's because I have yet to import results. So the idea with Direct Connect is you don't get around the importing, because this is where a lot of the action is now with Race Director, especially with more and more races publishing results for live results for smartphones and all of that. All of that activity happens on this screen. So it's the main thing you're getting with Direct Connect is when you hit import, import recognizes that those times exist and asks you if you want to use them. So we'll say yes. Times assigned 11. Now if you remember, we had 18 reads. The reason there aren't 18 finishers is several of those reads were duplicate reads for the same participant. So now, when we go run the results reports, we'll see those finishers. And then on the Direct Connect side, let's process a few more. Now we have a bunch more that have crossed. So on the race director side, we're still sitting at 11 reads, but when we hit the import button, recognizes that they're out there. 6 more times come in, and that cycle just keeps repeating as the race goes on. All right. So the idea is, and you'll notice in Direct Connect that it's set up by timing point. So if it's a triathlon, for example, where maybe you've got 2 readers in the transition area and a finish line reader, you can make all 3 connections on this screen. You can make up to 5 connections, and actually, if you expand this, there's up to 8 connections that you can make. It's rare that you would ever need more than 5, so I kept that screen kind of simple. Okay, so that's a quick example how Direct Connect works. Race Director has direct connection capabilities with not only iPico, but with MyLapse, RFID, and ChronoTrack, and one other, Winning Times. So there's all of those screens have this kind of a capability. All right. So I'm doing okay, we're about 30 minutes through. Okay, and I need to close these down in the right sequence, so I need to shut this down first. And that shuts that down, and now I'll close this. And, okay, ready to move on to my next topic, which is, I had lots of requests for me to cover timing points again. So we're going to do that at this time. And I want to show you, and what I did is in the last couple of weeks, I've had some people send me some, with support questions, send me some race backups. So I'm just going to select a couple of those because they have excellent examples of timing points. We're going to open up race number 107, which was a triathlon that happened last weekend, I believe. And this is fairly typical. So let's look at results 1. Okay, so timing points. So here we're getting into a race that's a bit more complicated than just a finish line. It's a triathlon. So it's set up as a 5-segment race, and specifically using the setting triathlon with transitions. The purpose of that setting is some of the reports for example, for the transition areas, generally you don't need pace and ranking there, so it gives you a streamlined report when you have that setting selected. A real important setting is segment definitions vary by division. And what that means is there's kind of different categories of divisions. So, there's some, I think there were some youth divisions and adult divisions and all kinds of different distances. So how you set up the segments is really quite different from division to division. So as long as you have this checked, you don't set the segments here, but you always set your timing points here. So timing points, the best way to think about timing points is they're almost identical. I almost call them chip readers, but it's not quite accurate to say that. By timing point, I mean a spot where you're going to be collecting results. It almost always is synonymous with readers, except in a finish line, for example, where you had both a primary reader and a backup reader, that's not two timing points. That's a single timing point where you just happen to use two readers. So that's why, but in most situations, a timing point and a reader are fairly synonymous. So in this case, they had one reader that was doing both the out of the swim and the off of the bike. So they called that one swim bike, and they said there's two occurrences. So essentially it's the amount of time they're out on the bike. And they set the gap factor at 15 minutes. So we don't expect to have two reads for a participant any closer than 15 minutes. And then the other three readers were for the T1, the T2, and then the finish. And we're only getting a single occurrence there. So obviously adds up to 5, looking good. Since we had segment definitions vary by division, we'll go to Taylor divisions. And we'll see the sprint triathlon, for example. So here's our segment button here. And the first thing you're asked is, what's the segment count? Now in this race, it just happens to be that every division is going to be the same. They're all going to be 5 segments. And here's where you specify. Okay, out of the swim, we're going to use timing point bike swim, occurrence number 1. For the T1 read, we're going to use the T1 reader. And you don't even get a choice on occurrence, because when we set up the timing point, we set there that there's only going to be one occurrence. So that's why those are aligned. For the bike, we're going to use the swim bike reader, but occurrence 2. For the T2, again, there's a single timing point set aside only for that, and the same for the finish. Now, one thing that is very common on these as you're setting these up, this copy, don't forget about this, because it can be a little bit overwhelming. You know, you went through all that trouble for the sprint triathlon, and if you were just in the process of setting this up, when you went to the next division, you know, all of this would be empty. So the copy, when you use copy, it asks you which division you want to copy from. So we would say division 1, and then all of this would be filled in, and maybe it's only the distances that you have to change. So remember this copy function. Okay. So there's that race. Another race recently sent to me was 6:37. And this race has some results in it too. And actually, I think the setup for this one was really quite similar, except it didn't vary by division. The segment definition was the same for every division, so you didn't really need to bother with that. But again, there were 4 timing points, and one of them had 2 occurrences. So there's the swim out, and then there's the bike out, which generally you think of as T1, and the bike in were all the same timing point. And when you look at the segment setup, you're going to get this message, and this is an important one. Once you've imported some results, RaceStructure is just not going to let you change some of these things. And so generally what you would have to do if you just had this set up wrong is you would have to go to enter results, and you would have to erase all the results, reconfigure the timing points and segments, and then re-import. We won't do that. But I do want to go into chip results. And so let's look at this, this bike one. And you'll notice when you're in the other, like in the swim out, it will tell you here that you've got 987 swim out times. Likewise, when you're at the finish, there's 999 finish times. But when you get to this complicated one for bike, there's 1,968 bike times, and there's a new column in RaceStructure 24, which occurrence. And you notice at the top, they're all occurrence 1, and when you get to the bottom, they're mostly occurrence 2. And if you want to see how the count breakout is, this button here will tell you that there's 993 occurrence 1 times and 975 occurrence 2 times. And it gets a little more complicated too. Like if you want to look up a bib number, 1108, because there's 2 reads for that person, which one do you want to see? Well, it's that one there I wanted to see. And likewise, overrides get a little bit more complicated because if you put in override for missed reads, you have to do it by the occurrence number. So if we were to add an override for 1108, and I'm just going to, it's going to ask you which occurrence, and it will tell you these are the 2 posted times I have, so you'll have to select one of those. Well, I don't really want to do this, so I'll cancel out of that. Okay, so but the idea here is prior to Race Director 2014, these import screens got very complicated because you had to try to do it by split, and especially when you had splits that were different by division, this importing process was kind of a mess. So now the import is much more related to the equipment that you're importing from. So I think most everyone's agreeing, even though it's a bit more complicated of a setup, when it comes to execution of the race, it's a much better way to go. All right, so that's all I want to go through as far as a review of timing points, because I want to get to some other topics. And one of them is cross-country. I had lots of, we're coming up on cross-country season, so I had lots of folks asking about cross-country. So what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to open a different race. And this is actually a local cross-country race that we score here in Fremont. And what I'm going to describe may not be how cross-country works in your area, but it most probably is, because what I'm finding across the U.S. for both high school and college, almost all cross-country is done pretty much the same way. There's almost always multiple races, and example race breakdowns are boys and girls and varsity and junior varsity and middle school, and they all kind of want them to compete against each other. These races tend to be about a half-hour offset from each other, and generally it's a very busy finish line. As one race is finishing, you're getting another race started, and so Race Director has a kind of a common approach for that. If you want more information, under the help menu, these getting started guides are a good way to go, and there is a specific one in here somewhere, right here, cross-country races. That goes over in a bit more detail than I will here with some nice screenshots. So if you're doing cross-country for the first time, that document's a good one to read, and it will let you go through rather slowly what I'm going to do here rather quickly. Now, one of the main features of Race Director is, even though there's multiple races, especially with regard to varsity and junior varsity, coaches would rather not have to predetermine who's going to be in which race. So Race Director actually has a nice approach for this, where it will actually let the finish line determine which race they're in. So all the coach has to do is provide a roster of the participants. And one thing I want to show is how simple it is to get information from the coach. So from the coach, you would generally send out a template that would have, generally all you need are 3 columns: first name, last name, their gender, and what grade they're in. And by grade, it could be other things like freshman, sophomore, but in this case, we're just using a numerical grade. Now, when you get this from the coach, it's not quite ready to go into Race Director. What you would end up adding to it are 2 more columns: the team number and the bib number. So we got this roster from the Fremont coach, and when we go into Taylor Teams, guess what? Fremont is Team 1. Now you'll see there's a team classification as well. And so in general, we're going to use divisions in Race Director for each of these races, like varsity boys, varsity girls. That's what the divisions are going to be. What's often an element in cross country is the size of the school. Class A, Class B. In this case, it was Division I and Division II. Either the school is a Division I or Division II, and we used A and B. I don't know why, but we used A and B. So A is Division I, and B schools are Division II. So in the spreadsheet that we got from the coach, we turned it into this spreadsheet just by dragging the team number down on all participants, and based on the bib numbers we had available. In fact, this team got quite a cross section of bib numbers. We're going to assign the bib numbers. So in Race Director, we've got 644 participants, and I think that spreadsheet had, but you notice there was no designation whether they're varsity, junior varsity, middle school, other than the grade. I mean, it doesn't really tell you much. So when we go to update participants, we'll use the import from other sources. We'll use Excel, and we'll locate this, not the one from the coach, but the one that we built. And when we go to step 2, we've got a template for this, our cross-country template, so the mapping is already done for us. So it's just a matter of going to the finish, and here's the critical step here. And I'm sorry, I'm a little bit out of sequence in doing this. I'm going to explain why in a minute that I selected this Division 3. But we're actually going to, this Division 3 is actually the only division in this race that really isn't a competitive race. So we've got a catch-all division set up. In this case, we use Division 3. And we're going to build this. And now we just added those 72 participants. So yeah, sorry, I stopped following my notes, which was not a good idea. So let's go to Taylor Divisions. And this race evolved over the years. Initially, there was only 2 divisions, boys and girls. And so the division that we register everyone into, and we'll see a little bit more of this in a minute, it's referred to as the default division in Race Director. Okay, so we have also a JV boys and middle school and JV girls. Those are all races that were run. And we have a Division 99 that we're setting up in case there's chip reads that we can't make sense of. Okay, there are some important settings in tailoring for cross-country races. And one of them is very critical. It's this one right here. Separate finish line for each division. And by separate finish line, we don't mean a separate physical finish line. It's actually going to be one common finish line. But we're going to process the results as if each race had their own finish line. The default division means what division are people registered into. And because it's actually going to be the processing of the result that forces an automatic switch to the competitive division that they were timed in. And if that's not making sense, it'll make more sense in a minute when we actually pull in some results. Other settings for cross-country are on the Results 2 tab. Excuse me. Use cross-country scoring. The displacement in most high school and college meets are 5 and 7, meaning teams that have under the minimum of 5, the participants on those teams won't really factor into the scoring, and neither will any of the 8 and above finishers of any teams. They'll be allowed to participate, but they really won't count in the scoring. Tiebreaker is kind of an important setting. The NCAA came out with a new rule on college tiebreaker, and I forget what it is. The help is always a good thing to go to, and there should be an explanation about it. Yeah, right here. Okay, so the NCAA rule, this cross-country is selected. This rule is designed to compare finishers between teams that tie in the sequence in which they finish on a team. For example, if two or more teams tie, the finish position of finishers 1, 2, 3, etc. on each team are compared. The team with the most wins is the winner of the tie. That's a very complicated tiebreaker rule, but it's what the NCAA uses. Most high school will use next finisher, meaning finisher number 6 in this case. I'm seeing more and more last scored, meaning finisher number 5. So the choice is yours as far as how you break ties. There's probably conference rules that dictate that. So as a timer, it's a good idea to know that before you get into the race. Okay, so when you process results, what you'll notice, because we have this setting here on separate finish line for each division, when you go to results entry, there's a new setting here. Which division is it? And in fact, in this race, the varsity girls started at 9. The boys started at 9:30, and then the other races started after that. So you'll notice that these import settings are remembered based on the division that you select. And so picture this race going off at 9 o'clock, and you really have one chip system. And this import range is really important. On the day of the race, the key element is this beginning time. So it started at 9. It's a 5K. We really don't expect any finishers before 9:18. So from 9:18, on the day of the race, this was probably wide open at 99 hours. But now our results file really has 5 races worth of data on it. So I've got an upper bound of 945. So when we go to import the results, what's happened is everyone that was in, there were 99 times processed, and prior to doing this import, all 716 participants were in Division 3. At this point, 99 have been transferred to Division 2, the varsity girls. See, they're all in Division 2 now, and goes all the way up to 932. All right, so think it's that Saturday morning, and at 9:30, that gun went off for the second race, and at 9:32 we had our last finisher. But the next race is the boys' race. So it started at 9:30. So we have our import range there from 9:45 to 9:15. So it's fairly tight. We went up to 9:45 here, but we really only needed to go through like 9:33. So, but we're going to actually import from the same reader, the same results file, but a different import range. And now 113 of those participants are in Division 1. So the Fremont coach didn't really have to specify which of the team members were going to be in the varsity race. By crossing that finish line, they're actually scored in the varsity race. And once you have these results imported, you're ready to go with results reports, which are found under team reports. And the key ones are going to be, there's some pre-race reports, a registration roster, and a packet pickup. But cross-country finish list. So, and here's where classifications come into play. So let's do the varsity girls first. And this is basically the finish list. And hang on here just a second. Sorry, I've got some other settings on here. One of them was ignore classifications. So I don't want that on right now. And there's athletic.net and TFRRS have race director keeps up to date with their requirements for export, and this is where that's created. I'm going to turn that off right now, and I'm going to process that finish list again for the varsity girls. And this time, because I had ignore classifications off, we see everybody in the Class A schools first. You see this one was displaced because this team that Brooke was on had fewer than 5 finishers. So this is keeping track of this is their actual finish place, and this is their score place. So once we get to 23, they're the same, but because this person doesn't count, when we get to 25, they're scored as 24. That's how this cross-country displacement works. And then in this case, we didn't have anyone with more than 7 on a team, so we don't see any greater than 7s. But then we jump into the Division II schools, and we had quite a few schools there that had fewer than 5 finishers. So that's the finish list. Probably the most common report is the detail team report here. We'll do that for the girls. And essentially, that shows us, that Spring Lake with 57 in the cumulative scoring position was the winner, and position 2 is 77 Manistee Chippewas, and that is the summary report is a much briefer report. It shows you a single line for every team and the finish places, and then there are 4 teams that were incomplete. They only, they didn't have enough finishers. Okay, so that's cross country, and we're getting to the top of the hour, and I'm getting behind now, I'm afraid. So I'm going to jump quickly. There were other questions about, a lot of questions about MyFinish and Kiosks screens. So I'm going to do a real quick MyFinish. So myfinish.com is a website that you can use for smartphone results. Results are published there immediately as you're processing your chip results. And so let's do a quick overview of that. Whoops, wrong race. All right, so this race here is configured as a MyFinish race. Now there's other live results options out there as well. Exact, Run Sign Up, CT Live. They all kind of use the same flow. MyFinish.com, if you want to use the service, there is a $50 a race charge for it because there's some server charges involved. But the idea is as finishers cross the finish line, as you're importing their results, they're actually published to a website, and shortly after they finish, they can even have a QR code on their bib, scan it, and they'll get a personalized result. So right now, I've got this race, this Chris Cook Memorial is up. So imagine this is your smartphone. This is a list of the races there. It's a fairly straightforward process. In Taylor Divisions, we use this event process. So we have a single event, and there's a setup process that you would do prior to the execution of the race, after you have all of your participants. Essentially, this uploads the race setup and participant information. You can put some footer text in on the message that goes out at MyFinish. You won't see this prompt here. And this is saying that your entire race and participants have been uploaded to MyFinish. And the idea is, as you are processing results, you're going to see this setting, and if you say yes, you'll get that same screen. So you might have just changed some participants or added some new participants. So now you want to do a new re-upload. So every time you go into enter results, you get this prompt asking, do you want to upload that again? And we just did it, so I'll say no here. And there's going to be some very new looking settings on this screen. And one of those is I actually have this race set up for both my finish and run sign up. And we're going to, with the auto after import, you literally do nothing. You just import your chip results as you normally do, and at the end of each import, the results are automatically published. The other option is to do it manually, so you can do as many imports as you want. It won't publish it until you hit the Publish Live Results button. And the results have been published. Now this process has changed in the last few weeks. It used to be quite a delay, a little bit more of a delay, because it would actually process all of the results at my finish and then report back to you, and you'd be kind of stuck there waiting. Right now it just pushes them up and returns you to race director as soon as they've been pushed up, and you can go on and do other things. And then at my finish, we should be able to go into this race now and look at the leaderboard. And I've got some caching issues because I've done this on this browser before. Yeah, there we go. So now we see the finishers. If someone actually scans their QR code, they're going to come to a prompt like this. It'll show them their overall place within their gender. If they click on any of these, they'll see a list of those, of everyone in their gender, for example. And this caching is getting me again. So there's all of the finishers in their gender. If this were a triathlon, you would see all the splits down here. So that's the idea with my finish. Now, as far as a lot of questions about results kiosks. And for results kiosks, it gets tricky, because the idea here is you want to, as you're processing results, you want people to be able to walk up to PCs, type in their bib number, and see their results. And actually, and a lot of these have printers attached to them, so they can actually print their results and walk away with it. That does require networking, unless it's a my finish race. If it's a my finish race, then race director will actually go grab that data, results data from my finish, and show it on the screen. And that alleviates you from the headache of having to have a network, which is significant. In fact, I'm not really going to go through how to do the networking. If you've got that question, send me an email, because I've got some detailed instructions on how you network multiple computers for doing the kiosk. So let's look at where the kiosk screens are. So now picture in fact, I want to show you just, let's go back into results. And I'm going to get rid of all the results here. So now we have no more results on this computer, but deleting those results did not delete them at my finish. So if we go to the this kiosk screen, you're asked, would you like to use my finish? And we'll say yes. And then now if I can remember a bib number that was up there, I think I can. So there's some questions here to answer. Is there a label printer? I'm going to say none here because I don't have one attached. If you have a logo for your timing company that you want on to go out on the printer that you have locally, I can help you with that. Okay, so that's all we're going to do for the setup. All right, so shoot. Hang on, sorry. You'd think I would have known that. Oh, 950. Let's try 950. Okay, so even though we've erased results on this computer, we're getting the results from MyFinish. So there's a huge advantage there in that you can set up all these kiosk computers prior to even doing race day registrations. So if this, there were 248 in this race, but I think, in fact, I know in this race about 100 of them registered on the race day, on race day. So even if this kiosk computer only has 150 of the participants, doesn't matter, because we're going to go grab all of that data from MyFinish. If you're using the networked, it's really no issue either, because these kiosk computers are going to be networked to the scoring computer, so all of the participants that we added and the results that we imported will be alive on that computer. So that's a quick run through of MyFinish and the results kiosks. So in fact, that little import process that publishing process you saw for MyFinish it's the same mechanism that is in play for CT Live, Exact, Run Sign Up, all of these results engines that are emerging out there. And one thing I've done recently for several timers is actually add publishing of GRU data at that same level. Now there's some development cost for that, because I'm generally going to develop that to match whatever your web server needs. So if you have a desire to have GRU data, which normally comes out of the overall results report, actually come up through the chip results import screen, I can help you with that. Just send me an email. All right, so I'm going to look at questions now, and I'm going to hope like crazy that everyone's still connected. So all right, so I'm going to okay, is the Direct Connect data stored anywhere? Yes. In fact, I can give you the name. The Direct Connect data is stored in the standard WinRace files folder. That for IPECO, for example, the name of that file is ipeco.dbf, and for other chip systems, I can't remember what I use, but if you need to know more about that, just send me an email. Okay, do you recommend setting up a bandit division and a DNS division? I do recommend a bandit division, and by that I mean what we have been talking about here. Bandits, unfortunately, it's a carryover from pull tag scoring, and what it meant was generally referred to as people that didn't register for the race but went into your finish shoot, and you had to deal with them because you probably recorded a time for them, and they got the term bandit because they didn't register but they participated anyway. So even though we call these bandit division, and I refer to it here on the finish line as designate a bib number range for bandit participants, it really means, and for chip reads, the bib range is rarely ever needed. But it's generally, it's most often, it's this setting here, bandit assigned division 99. The most common scenario is you had a bunch of last-minute people sign up, and you processed a chip result before you were able to get them registered into Race Director. Well, since most chip systems, when the chip result is read, you know immediately what bib number it is. Race Director doesn't use this bandit bib number range. Since it knows the bib number and it knows it's not set up, it sets up that bib number. So bib number 123, that chip was read, it will set up bib number 123 as unknown participant, and it will put them in division 99 so it doesn't mess up your 5K and 10K results. All right, we got about 7 minutes. Let's see if other questions here. What is the reason you use miles in a kilometer race? Okay, The reason we, a good question. The reason we use miles is because when we go to reports, and this is a kind of a U.S. convention. When we run reports, yeah, I deleted all the reports, all the results on this race. When most people in the U.S. want to see their pace as minutes per mile. I ran, 8 minutes 22 seconds per mile. They really don't want to see 6 minutes 21 seconds per kilometer. It's just, I don't know. It's just kind of the way it is in the U.S. In other countries, they want the distance in kilometers and they want to see the pace in kilometers. It just isn't the case in the U.S. generally. All right. Okay, you showed an export format in the cross-country demo of TFRRS. Is this in 2015? I don't see it in 2014. No, it's in. This is 2014 that I'm running here. You should see it on. I have to get back into a cross-country race. So as long as you have your race set up as cross-country and you go to this cross-country finish list, you should see this create export file setting. And your choices are athletic.net or TFRRS. And to be honest, the formats are still in the 2013, and I haven't heard from either one of these guys whether anything's changed in 2014, but I'm going to write myself a note to do that because they've never been the same from year to year yet, so I'm sure there's going to be some kind of changes. So, it's always a good idea to use this process. Okay, so this is Race Director 2014, and I don't want to divulge a serial number, but believe me, it is. Before doing any race, I would suggest doing this download update to get the latest updates in Race Director. It only takes a minute. It's a two-step process. Step one is to do the download, and step two is to actually go in. I'm going to show you where you find this in Windows 7, and I'm not quite sure what to tell you about Windows 8, but in Windows 7, under all programs, you'll have a Race Director folder, and it's 2014 update. What I recommend is you drag that out onto your desktop, as I have, and I put it right next to my Race Director icon so that after I've done the upload or download, I can immediately run the update. And after you've run the update, and I'm not going to do this either, but if you go to Help and About Race Director, when you open up that screen, it will show you a build date that is almost always going to be within a couple days. Okay, keep going here. Questions? Do other people have a lot of trouble having a DAG system? Failures. Yeah, that might be a good one to post at my forum. I don't get many support questions about DAG any longer. You have added an extra standard column in the GRU exports team name. This is going to stay as we will need to rewrite our web. Okay, is this going to stay as we? Okay, so here's why I recommend that maybe you get with me and have me write a. It's going to be between $150 and $300, but have me write a custom GRU output for your timing company, and that way it'll never change. And in fact, it's a one-time charge. So I'll get it set exactly the way you want to. And when you go from 2014 to 2015, if your GRU requirements aren't any different, it's going to continue working in 2015. It will continue working until you need to change it, and then if it's a simple change, I'm most likely not going to charge you for that. So if you want to stabilize GRU and actually get it in a better place, and as far as the chip results import, you might have me create a tailored one for you. Okay. When tailoring ages, date of birth settings for the race that are scored in a series, should you use a particular date to count? Yeah, okay, great question. That if you're doing a series, in generally there's some kind of coordinator. What you should coordinate with them, and what I usually see is for the series, they use an age calculation date, generally of January 1 of the current year or December 31 of the current year. And what you might have to do is change this age calculation date just before you run the series. And unfortunately, you have to go to each race in the series and change it. And then you'll have to switch it back because for the individual race, they may not want it, the age calculation date there. But generally, to keep people in the same age group across the entire series, it's good to have every race in the series have the same age calculation date. All right. Good questions? Okay. And I'm getting more questions than I can answer right now. Okay, yes, I will post this recording on YouTube, and I see my time is up now, so we're going to get cut off, so I'm just going to end the session now. Thanks everyone for attending, and I hope this all came through clearly, and send me some notes if it did. If there's anything I can do to improve these, let me know. Thanks again, and look forward to the next one probably in a couple months. Talk to you later, everyone. Bye.